Good morning, beloved friends. As the sun rises upon this blessed Wednesday, June 10th, we stand at the threshold of a new day filled with possibilities we cannot yet see and blessings we have not yet touched. Every morning carries within it a sacred invitation from God, a reminder that His mercy is new, His love is constant, and His plans for our lives are still unfolding. Some of us have been waiting for answers. Some have been praying for opportunities. Some have stood before closed doors, wondering if their season of breakthrough would ever come. Yet today we gather with faith in our hearts and hope in our spirits, believing that the God who created pathways through deserts and made rivers flow in dry places is still opening doors for His children. Today is not merely another day on the calendar. It is another chance to walk in divine favor. It is another opportunity to receive heavenly guidance. It is another moment to trust that what God has prepared for us cannot be blocked by fear, delayed by doubt, or stolen by circumstance. As we enter this time of prayer, let us lift our eyes above our challenges and focus on the one who holds every key. Let us believe that God can unlock doors of opportunity, doors of healing, doors of provision, doors of wisdom, and doors of purpose. May our hearts be open to His leading and our spirits ready to follow wherever His grace directs us. Today, let us pray with expectation, walk with confidence, and trust that the Lord is already working behind the scenes, preparing blessings greater than we can imagine. For when God opens a door, no one can shut it, and when He leads His children, He leads them toward hope, favor, and victory. May this day be filled with divine guidance, supernatural favor, and the unmistakable presence of God. Trust God's timing for open doors. There is a quiet wisdom that comes with waiting, though few of us welcome it when it arrives. We live in a world that celebrates speed, applauds immediate results, and teaches us that every dream should be fulfilled on demand. Yet God, in His infinite understanding, often works according to a rhythm far different from our own. His clock is not hurried by our anxiety, nor is His purpose delayed by our uncertainty. He moves with perfect precision, and every door He opens is aligned with a timing that is greater than our plans and wiser than our expectations. Many of us have stood before doors that would not open. We knocked with hopeful hearts. We prayed earnest prayers. We prepared ourselves as best we knew how. Yet the door remained closed. In those moments, disappointment can feel heavy. Questions begin to gather in the corners of our minds. We wonder if God has heard us. We wonder if our prayers have somehow been misplaced among the stars. But faith reminds us that a closed door is not always a sign of rejection. Sometimes it is evidence of divine protection. Sometimes God sees what we cannot see. He sees the hidden dangers behind opportunities that appear attractive. He sees the burdens concealed beneath what seems like a blessing. He sees tomorrow while we struggle to understand today. How many times have we looked back upon our lives and discovered that what we once called a disappointment became a hidden gift? The opportunity that slipped away protected us from heartache. The relationship that ended created space for healing. The path that seemed blocked redirected us toward a destination far better than the one we had imagined. God's wisdom is not limited by our perspective. He does not merely respond to our requests. He responds according to His knowledge of what will truly bless our lives. While we focus on the next step, He sees the entire journey. While we ask for a single door to open, He prepares a future filled with possibilities we cannot yet imagine. Trusting God's timing requires courage. It requires us to believe even when evidence appears scarce. It asks us to hold hope in our hands when circumstances suggest surrender. Yet this trust is not blind. It is rooted in the character of a faithful God who has never abandoned His children. The same God who paints the dawn across the morning sky understands the details of your life. The same God who tells the oceans where to stop and the stars where to shine has not forgotten your name. Your story matters to Him. Your prayers matter to Him. Your waiting matters to Him. There is sacred work happening in seasons of waiting. While you wait, God is strengthening your faith. While you wait, He is refining your character. While you wait, He is teaching lessons that prosperity alone could never teach. While you wait, He is preparing you for blessings that require a stronger heart, deeper wisdom, and greater spiritual maturity. Sometimes we pray for open doors without realizing that God is first preparing us to walk through them. We ask for greater opportunities, but He understands that greater opportunities require greater responsibility. We seek promotion, but He desires to build integrity. We desire success, but He desires transformation. The waiting season is not wasted. It is a classroom where faith learns endurance. It is a workshop where character is shaped. It is a garden where patience grows roots deep enough to withstand future storms. Do not underestimate what God is accomplishing in your life during the quiet seasons. The world may overlook hidden growth, but heaven does not. A seed buried beneath the soil may appear inactive, yet beneath the surface something miraculous is taking place. Roots are forming, life is developing, strength is increasing, and when the appointed season arrives, what was hidden emerges with beauty and purpose. Perhaps you feel like that seed today. Perhaps you have prayed for opportunities that have not yet appeared. Perhaps you have watched others move forward while your own progress seems delayed. Perhaps you wonder when your moment will come. Take heart. God has not forgotten you. The one who planted purpose within your soul knows exactly where you are. He knows every disappointment you have carried. He knows every tear you have shed in private. He knows every prayer whispered in the darkness when no one else could hear. And He is still working, even when doors remain closed. God is working. Even when answers seem delayed, God is working. Even when circumstances appear unchanged, God is working. Faith is not believing only when miracles are visible. Faith is believing that God remains active even when His hand is hidden from sight. There are blessings already moving toward you that you cannot yet see. There are conversations taking place that will affect your future. There are opportunities being prepared. There are connections being arranged. There are answers being formed. God is weaving together details beyond your understanding, creating a masterpiece from threads you cannot yet recognize. The challenge before us is to trust His process. Trust does not mean we stop praying. Trust does not mean we stop working. Trust does not mean we stop dreaming. Trust means we continue moving forward with confidence that God's timing is wiser than our own. We pray, but we do not panic. We hope, but we do not despair. We prepare, but we do not force. We trust that what God ordains will arrive at the proper moment. There is a peace that enters the heart when we surrender the calendar to God. We stop measuring our worth by deadlines. We stop comparing our journey to someone else's path. We stop believing that delayed blessings are forgotten blessings. Instead, we learn to rest in the assurance that God's plans are unfolding exactly as they should. What is meant for you cannot be stolen by another person's success. What God has prepared for your life cannot be destroyed by temporary setbacks. What heaven has ordained will not be canceled by earthly obstacles. When God opens a door, no force of opposition can permanently close it. And when He says the time has come, no delay can prevent His purpose from being fulfilled. The story of your life is still being written. The chapter you are living today is not the final chapter. The waiting is not the ending. The uncertainty is not the ending. The unanswered prayer is not the ending. God specializes in bringing hope where others see impossibility. He specializes in creating pathways where none seem to exist. He specializes in opening doors that human effort alone could never unlock. So stand tall today. Lift your eyes beyond your present circumstances. Refuse to let discouragement become your companion. Refuse to allow fear to write the narrative of your future. Instead, choose faith. Choose hope. Choose trust. Believe that God's timing is perfect even when it is mysterious. Believe that every closed door has purpose. Believe that every delay contains meaning. Believe that every season is working together for your good. And as this day unfolds, walk forward with quiet confidence, The God who guided you yesterday is guiding you today. The God who sustained you through past trials will sustain you through present challenges. The God who has opened doors before is fully capable of opening new doors again. Your breakthrough is not forgotten. Your blessing is not lost. Your purpose is not abandoned. Trust the Lord with your whole heart and trust His timing for open doors. For in the fullness of His perfect season, what He has prepared for you will arrive, and when it does, you will understand that every moment of waiting was held securely in the hands of a faithful God. Seek divine guidance before every decision. There are crossroads in every life. Some appear grand and unmistakable, standing before us like towering gates that demand a choice. Others arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary moments, a conversation, an opportunity, a change of direction, a single step that seems small today but shapes the course of tomorrow. Life is woven together by decisions, and each decision carries the power to lead us closer to our purpose or farther from the peace God desires for us. That is why divine guidance is not a luxury for the believer. It is a necessity. Too often we rush ahead armed with our own understanding. We lean heavily upon what we can see, what we can calculate, what appears logical to the natural mind. Yet human vision is limited. We see fragments while God sees the whole picture. We see the road directly before us, but God sees every curve, every hill, every valley, and every destination that lies ahead. There is wisdom in recognizing our limitations. There is strength in admitting that we do not know everything. And there is freedom in placing our hand in the hand of God and allowing Him to lead us where we cannot lead ourselves. The world encourages self-reliance above all else. It praises the individual who never asks for help and never acknowledges uncertainty. But faith teaches a different lesson. Faith teaches that true strength is found in dependence upon God. It teaches that wisdom begins when we recognize the source of all wisdom. It teaches that guidance is available to those humble enough to seek it. Every morning presents a fresh opportunity to ask the Lord for direction. Before the first decision is made, before the first challenge appears, before the first opportunity arrives, we can bow our hearts before God and say, "Lead me today, guide my thoughts, direct my steps. Help me see what you want me to see and avoid what you want me to avoid." Such a prayer may seem simple, yet it has the power to transform an entire day. When we invite God into our decisions, we are acknowledging that our lives are not accidents drifting aimlessly through time. We are affirming that there is divine purpose at work, a loving Father who cares deeply about every detail of our journey. God's guidance is not reserved only for life's major decisions. He cares about the everyday matters as well. He cares about our relationships, our work, our attitudes, our priorities, and the countless choices that shape our character. Nothing is too small for His attention because nothing concerning His children is insignificant to Him. How comforting it is to know that we do not walk through life alone. The Creator of the universe is not distant or indifferent. He is present. He listens. He speaks. He guides. Sometimes His guidance comes through Scripture, where ancient words become living wisdom for present circumstances. Sometimes it comes through prayer, as peace settles upon a troubled heart. Sometimes it comes through wise counsel from trusted people. Sometimes it comes through circumstances that open one path while gently closing another. And sometimes His guidance arrives as a quiet whisper within the soul, a gentle nudge that cannot easily be explained but is deeply understood. Those who learn to seek God's guidance discover something remarkable. He often speaks in ways that require attentiveness rather than haste. The hurried heart misses much. The distracted mind overlooks much. The anxious spirit struggles to hear. But when we create space for God, when we pause long enough to listen, His direction becomes clearer. In a noisy world filled with competing voices, learning to hear God's voice is one of the greatest gifts a believer can cultivate. There are voices of fear, voices of pride, voices of doubt, voices of public opinion, voices of past failures, voices of future worries. Each one competes for our attention, each one eager to influence our choices. Yet above them all is the voice of God, a voice that brings peace rather than confusion, wisdom rather than chaos, hope rather than despair. His guidance does not always lead us toward the easiest path. Sometimes God directs us toward challenges that stretch our faith. Sometimes he calls us beyond familiar territory into places where dependence upon him becomes essential. But wherever his guidance leads, his presence accompanies. That truth changes everything, for success without God's presence can leave a soul empty. But even difficult journeys become bearable when God walks beside us. Many people spend their lives chasing open doors without ever asking whether those doors align with God's purpose. They pursue opportunities simply because they are available. They move forward because others expect them to. They follow trends, pressures, and ambitions without seeking divine confirmation. Yet not every open door is a God door. Not every opportunity is an assignment. Not every path leads toward purpose. This is why discernment matters. Discernment allows us to distinguish between what is merely good and what is truly God's best. It helps us recognize the difference between temporary excitement and lasting fulfillment. It enables us to evaluate choices through the lens of faith rather than emotion alone. And discernment grows when we consistently seek divine guidance. The more we walk with God, the more familiar his voice becomes. The more we trust him, the more confidently we follow. The more we surrender our plans, the more clearly his purpose emerges. There will be moments when God's guidance challenges our assumptions. He may lead us to forgive when resentment feels justified. He may call us to wait when impatience urges action. He may ask us to release something we desperately want to hold on to. He may direct us towards service when we are focused on personal gain. His ways often rise above human reasoning. Yet history is filled with people who discovered that God's wisdom surpassed their own. When they trusted him, doors opened that they could never have opened themselves. When they followed his leading, blessings emerged from unexpected places. When they surrendered control, they found peace. The same remains true today. God still guides his children. He still illuminates dark paths. He still provides wisdom for uncertain seasons. He still directs willing hearts. Perhaps you are facing decisions right now. Perhaps you stand before questions that have no easy answers. Perhaps you are wondering which direction to take, which opportunity to pursue, which door to walk through. Do not allow pressure to force a premature decision. Do not let fear become your counselor. Do not permit anxiety to become your guide. Instead, bring every concern before the Lord. Lay each question at his feet. Trust him with every uncertainty. Ask him for wisdom. Ask him for clarity. Ask him for courage to obey whatever he reveals. And then wait with expectation. Not passive waiting, but hopeful waiting. Not fearful waiting, but faithful waiting. Trust that God is able to communicate with those who seek him sincerely. Trust that he knows what you do not know. Trust that he sees what you cannot see. Trust that his direction will come at the right time. The beautiful truth is that God's guidance is an expression of his love. He guides because he cares. He directs because he values your future. He warns because he protects. He leads because he desires your flourishing. Every instruction from God is rooted in his goodness. Every direction he provides flows from his wisdom. Every path he illuminates is touched by his grace. So as you move through this day, do not rely solely upon your own understanding. Invite God into every conversation, every opportunity, every challenge, and every decision. Ask him to order your steps. Ask him to shape your thought. Ask him to align your desires with his purpose. Walk forward with a listening heart and a willing spirit. For the God who created you knows exactly where you are meant to go. He knows the doors that should open and the doors that should remain closed. He knows the relationships that will strengthen your journey and the distractions that could lead you astray. And if you seek his guidance before every decision, you will discover a profound peace, the peace that comes from knowing you are not navigating life alone. You are being led by the one whose wisdom never fails, whose love never wavers, and whose guidance never loses its way. Trust him today. Follow his voice and allow his divine guidance to light your path, one faithful step at a time. Walk in faith and expect favor. There is a beautiful difference between merely surviving a day and stepping into a day with expectation. One drifts through the hours carrying uncertainty like a heavy burden upon the shoulders. The other rises with a quiet confidence, believing that God is already at work before the first prayer is spoken, before the first step is taken, before the first challenge appears on the horizon. Faith is not simply believing that God exists. Faith is believing that God is actively involved in the details of our lives. It is trusting that His hand is moving even when our eyes cannot see the movement. It is waking each morning with the conviction that heaven is not silent, that grace is not absent, and that God's goodness is still flowing toward His children. Many people understand faith as a response to blessing, but true faith often comes before the blessing arrives. It celebrates while the answer is still forming. It rejoices while the door is still closed. It gives thanks while the miracle is still on its way. Faith dares to believe before evidence appears. That is what makes faith so powerful. The world says, I will believe it when I see it. Faith says, I believe it because God said it. The world waits for certainty before taking a step. Faith takes a step because it trusts the one who directs the path. This kind of faith transforms the way we walk through life. It changes how we view challenges. It changes how we respond to setbacks. It changes how we interpret delays and disappointments. Instead of seeing obstacles as proof that God has forgotten us, faith teaches us to see them as opportunities to trust Him more deeply. There are seasons when life feels generous. Doors open, opportunities appear, relationships flourish, prayers seem to receive immediate answers. During such moments, faith feels easy, but there are other seasons. Seasons when the night feels long, seasons when answers seem delayed, seasons when uncertainty surrounds us like a dense fog. Seasons when every step requires courage. It is in those moments that faith becomes more than a comforting idea. It becomes a lifeline. Faith whispers to the weary heart, keep going. Faith says to the discouraged soul, do not surrender. Faith reminds us that God is present even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Faith insists that a difficult chapter is not the final chapter. And because faith remains rooted in God's character rather than changing circumstances, it continues standing even when everything else appears unstable. When we choose to walk in faith, we are choosing to trust God's promises above our fears. Fear is a persuasive voice. It speaks loudly. It paints troubling pictures. It magnifies problems and minimizes possibilities. Fear tells us what could go wrong. Fear reminds us of past failures. Fear urges us to remain where it feels safe and familiar. But faith speaks differently. Faith reminds us that God is greater than every obstacle. Faith points toward possibilities that fear refuses to acknowledge. Faith remembers God's faithfulness in yesterday's battles and draws strength for today's journey. Faith does not deny reality. It simply refuses to allow reality to have the final word. For the believer, God's promises always have the final word. Walking in faith also means expecting favor. Now, favor is often misunderstood. Some imagine favor as a life free from challenges, a journey untouched by hardship, a road paved only with success. But divine favor is far deeper and far richer than that. Favor is God's hand upon your life. Favor is His guidance when confusion surrounds you. Favor is His strength when your own strength begins to fail. Favor is finding peace in the middle of a storm. Favor is discovering opportunity where others see impossibility. Favor is receiving wisdom for situations that seem beyond your understanding. Favor is God's presence accompanying you through every season. Sometimes favor opens doors. Sometimes favor closes doors. Sometimes favor protects you from what you thought you wanted. Sometimes favor leads you toward blessings you never knew to seek. Favor does not always look the way we expect, but it always carries the fingerprints of God's goodness. Imagine beginning each day with the expectation that God's favor is already working on your behalf. Imagine believing that He is arranging circumstances for your good. Imagine trusting that He is preparing opportunities you have not yet discovered. Imagine knowing that His grace goes before you into every meeting, every conversation, every challenge, and every responsibility. Such expectation changes the atmosphere of the heart. It replaces dread with hope. It replaces anxiety with confidence. It replaces defeat with anticipation. For expectation is the language of faith. The farmer plants seeds because he expects a harvest. The traveler begins the journey because she expects a destination. The student studies because he expects growth. Likewise, the believer prays because he expects God to hear. The believer trusts because she expects God to act. The believer hopes because expectation is rooted in the faithfulness of God. And what a faithful God He is. Think of the countless ways He has carried you already. Think of the battles you thought would destroy you but did not. Think of the burdens you thought were too heavy but somehow managed to bear. Think of the doors that opened at just the right moment. Think of the prayers that received answers in ways you never anticipated. The same God who guided you through those seasons remains with you today. His power has not diminished. His love has not weakened. His promises have not expired. His favor has not disappeared. Every sunrise is evidence that His mercy continues. Every breath is evidence that His grace remains available. Every new day is an invitation to trust Him again. Sometimes we underestimate the power of expectation because we focus too heavily upon present circumstances. We allow temporary challenges to define permanent beliefs. We permit current difficulties to convince us that future blessings are impossible. But faith refuses to build conclusions from incomplete stories. Faith understands that God is still writing. Faith knows that today's struggle may become tomorrow's testimony. Faith believes that God's plans extend beyond the limitations of the present moment. The person who walks in faith does not ignore challenges. They simply refuse to become imprisoned by them. They acknowledge difficulties while believing in God's ability. They recognize obstacles while trusting God's power. They face uncertainty while expecting divine guidance. Their confidence is not rooted in personal strength but in God's faithfulness. This distinction is important because human strength eventually grows weary. Human wisdom eventually reaches its limit. Human resources eventually run out. But God's resources never diminish. His wisdom never fails. His power never weakens. His love never ends. Therefore, we can walk forward with confidence, not arrogance, not presumption, but confidence, a steady assurance that God is working even when we cannot trace every detail of His work, a peaceful certainty that His favor is surrounding us, a quiet expectation that blessings can emerge from unexpected places. As this day unfolds, choose to walk with that expectation. Expect God to provide wisdom when you need direction. Expect Him to provide strength when challenges arise. Expect Him to open doors that align with His purpose. Expect Him to place the right people along your path. Expect Him to supply what is necessary for the assignments He has given you. Expect Him to remain faithful because faithfulness is His nature. And even if answers do not arrive immediately, continue expecting. Even if circumstances take time to change, continue expecting. Even if the journey becomes difficult, continue expecting. For expectation rooted in faith is never wasted. God honors hearts that trust Him. He responds to those who seek Him. He delights in those who place their confidence in His promises. Walk into this day believing that God's favor surrounds you like a shield. Walk into this day knowing that His grace goes before you. Walk into this day expecting goodness, mercy, wisdom, strength, and opportunity. And when challenges come, as they sometimes will, do not allow them to steal your expectation. Lift your eyes higher. Remember who walks beside you. Remember who holds your future. Remember who opens doors no one can shut and makes pathways where none seem to exist. Walk in faith. Expect favor. Trust God's heart and discover the remarkable peace that comes from believing that the Lord is already working all things together for good, even before you see the evidence with your own eyes. Release fear and embrace God's purpose. Fear has a way of arriving uninvited. It slips quietly into our thoughts and settles itself in the corners of our minds. It whispers questions when God has spoken promises. It paints shadows across pathways that were meant to be walked in faith. It convinces us that what lies ahead is greater than the strength within us. And if we are not careful, fear will attempt to become the narrator of our story. Yet fear was never meant to lead us. It was never given authority over our dreams, our calling, our future, or our destiny. God did not create us to live imprisoned by the possibility of failure. He created us to walk in freedom, guided by faith, strengthened by grace, and anchored in the knowledge that our lives have divine purpose. Every person who has ever accomplished something meaningful has faced fear. Every dreamer has encountered doubt. Every faithful servant has stood at the edge of uncertainty and wondered what might happen if they stepped forward. Fear is not proof that you are weak. Fear is often evidence that you are standing at the threshold of growth. The challenge is not whether fear will appear. The challenge is whether we will allow it to dictate our decisions. There are countless people who spend years standing before doors that God has already opened because fear convinces them not to enter. They wait for certainty when God is asking for trust. They wait for guarantees when God is calling for faith. They wait for every question to be answered before taking a step. But purpose rarely unfolds that way. Purpose often requires movement before complete understanding. Purpose often invites us into places we have never been before. Purpose often asks us to trust God more deeply than we ever have. And that can feel uncomfortable. There is something familiar about staying where we are, even when the familiar place is limiting, even when it no longer serves God's highest purpose for our lives, even when we know deep within our hearts that God is calling us forward. Fear tells us that remaining still is safer. But there is a danger in refusing to move when God says move. There is a cost to remaining in places where purpose no longer resides. There is a sadness in spending years protecting ourselves from risks while missing opportunities God prepared for us. God's purpose is always larger than our fears. His vision for your life extends beyond your present limitation. He sees possibilities where you see obstacles. He sees potential where you see weakness. He sees victory where you see uncertainty. The God who created you understands your abilities better than you understand them yourself. He knows the gifts He placed within you. He knows the strength hidden beneath your struggles. He knows the wisdom that will emerge through experience. He knows the courage that will rise when you trust Him. You may focus on what you lack. God focuses on what He can accomplish through you. You may see your imperfections. God sees His purpose. You may remember every mistake. God sees every opportunity for redemption. This is why embracing God's purpose begins with changing the way we see ourselves. Too many people carry old labels that God never intended them to wear. Labels created by failure. Labels created by rejection. Labels created by disappointment. Labels created by criticism. Some have been told they are not capable enough, not talented enough, not educated enough, not experienced enough, not worthy enough. Over time, those words become heavy chains around the soul, and fear uses those chains to keep people from pursuing their God-given purpose. But God's voice speaks a different message. He does not define you by your worst day. He does not measure you by your greatest mistake. He does not evaluate you according to human standards. He sees you through the eyes of divine love. He sees possibility where others see limitation. He sees calling where others see ordinariness. He sees purpose where others see insignificance. The truth is that many of God's greatest works have been accomplished through people who felt inadequate, people who doubted themselves, people who questioned their abilities, people who wondered whether they were truly capable. Yet God's power has never depended upon human perfection. His power works through willing hearts. He is not searching for flawless people. He is searching for faithful people. People willing to trust Him despite uncertainty. People willing to move forward despite fear. People willing to obey even when the path is unfamiliar. Purpose begins to unfold when we stop focusing exclusively on our weaknesses and start trusting God's strength. For it is not our ability that determines the outcome. It is God's faithfulness. Think of all the ways fear attempts to limit us. Fear says, "What if you fail?" Purpose asks, "What if you succeed?" Fear says, "What if people criticize you?" Purpose asks, "What if your obedience inspires someone else?" Fear says, "What if you are not enough?" Purpose reminds you that God is enough. Fear magnifies obstacles. Purpose magnifies possibilities. Fear keeps our eyes fixed upon problems. Purpose lifts our eyes toward God's promises. One of the greatest acts of faith is choosing to move forward while fear still lingers. Many people imagine courage as the absence of fear, but courage is often moving despite fear. Courage is taking the next step when certainty has not yet arrived. Courage is trusting God with outcomes you cannot control. Courage is believing that His purpose is worth pursuing. The remarkable thing about courage is that it grows through use. The first step may feel difficult. The second step becomes easier. The third step brings greater confidence. Before long, what once seemed impossible begins to feel attainable because God has proven Himself faithful along the way. Fear loses power when faith is exercised. Fear weakens when trust grows stronger. Fear retreats when purpose takes center stage. There may be seasons when God's purpose requires you to leave familiar places behind. Perhaps it is an old mindset. Perhaps it is a limiting belief. Perhaps it is a relationship that no longer aligns with your growth. Perhaps it is a dream that has become too small for what God intends to do. Whatever it may be, purpose often requires release. You cannot fully embrace what God is bringing if your hands remain tightly closed around what He is asking you to leave behind. Release requires trust. Trust that God's future is better than your past. Trust that His plans are greater than your fears. Trust that His guidance is more reliable than your own understanding. Trust that every step of obedience carries purpose. And what a beautiful thing happens when we finally release fear. Our vision expands. Our confidence grows. Our hearts become available to new possibilities. Our spirits become receptive to God's direction. The chains that once held us begin to loosen. The burdens that once weighed us down become lighter. The dreams that once seemed impossible begin to appear attainable. Not because circumstances have necessarily changed overnight, but because our perspective has changed. We begin seeing ourselves through God's promises, rather than through fear's distortions. We begin evaluating opportunities through faith rather than anxiety. We begin living from purpose instead of protection. As this day unfolds, remember that God's purpose for your life is not an accident. You were created intentionally. You were gifted intentionally. You were placed in the season intentionally. There are people you can encourage. There are lives you can influence. There are assignments only you can fulfill. There are doors God desires you to walk through. Do not allow fear to convince you that your purpose is beyond reach. Do not permit doubt to silence what God has placed within you. Do not let yesterday's disappointments determine tomorrow's possibilities. Instead, lift your head, lift your eyes, lift your expectations. Trust that the God who called you will equip you. Trust that the God who guides you will sustain you. Trust that the God who opened the door will provide what is needed on the other side. Release fear. Release hesitation. Release the stories that tell you you are not enough. And embrace God's purpose with an open heart and willing spirit. For your future is not being written by fear. It is being shaped by the loving hands of a faithful God who sees your potential, knows your purpose, and is leading you toward a destiny far greater than you have yet imagined. Thank God for the doors He is opening. Gratitude is one of the most beautiful languages of faith. It is the song the soul sings when it remembers the goodness of God. It is the gentle light that shines through the windows of the heart, illuminating blessings that might otherwise go unnoticed. It is the sacred habit of recognizing that every breath, every opportunity, every moment of grace is a gift flowing from hands far greater than our own. There is something powerful about thanking God not only for what He has already done, but also for what He is doing right now and for what He is preparing to do in the days ahead. Many people wait until the blessing arrives before they offer thanksgiving. They wait until the door opens, until the prayer is answered, until the breakthrough becomes visible. Yet faith teaches us another way. Faith teaches us to thank God while the answer is still on its way. Faith teaches us to praise Him in the hallway before we enter the room. Faith teaches us to celebrate His faithfulness before the evidence fully appears. This kind of gratitude transforms the heart. It shifts our attention away from what is missing and toward what is present. It moves our focus from limitations to possibilities. It reminds us that God's goodness is not something we must search for in distant places. It is already surrounding us, woven into the fabric of everyday life. Every morning carries evidence of His kindness, the rising sun, the gift of another day, the strength to begin again, the opportunity to learn, to grow, to love, to hope. These are not small things. They are reminders that God's mercy continues. Sometimes we become so focused on the doors we want God to open that we overlook the doors He has already opened. We pray for future blessings while forgetting present blessings. We ask for greater opportunities while neglecting to appreciate the opportunities already before us. Yet gratitude teaches us to pause and notice. To notice how far we have come. To notice prayers that have already been answered. To notice battles we have already survived. To notice the countless ways God has carried us through seasons that once seemed impossible. Think for a moment about your own journey. There were days you wondered whether you would make it through. There were nights when uncertainty filled your thoughts. There were challenges that appeared larger than your strength. There were moments when hope felt fragile, and yet here you are, still standing, still breathing, still believing, still moving forward. That is not an accident. That is evidence of God's sustaining grace. Every chapter you have survived bears witness to His faithfulness. Every obstacle overcome tells a story of divine help. Every lesson learned reveals His patient guidance. When gratitude becomes a daily practice, we begin seeing life differently. We become less consumed by what we lack and more aware of what we possess. We stop measuring our lives solely by achievements and begin measuring them by grace. We discover that joy is not dependent upon perfect circumstances. Joy grows wherever gratitude takes root. There is a deep wisdom in learning to thank God before the door opens. Because gratitude before the blessing is an expression of trust. It says, Lord, I believe you are working even when I cannot see the results. It says, Lord, I trust your timing. It says, Lord, I know your plans are good. It says, Lord, I believe that what you have prepared for me will arrive at the right moment. Such gratitude honors God because it reflects confidence in His character. It acknowledges that His faithfulness does not depend upon our ability to see every detail. It recognizes that His goodness remains constant regardless of temporary circumstances. And what a comfort that truth brings. Because life does not always unfold according to our preferred schedule. Sometimes answers take longer than expected. Sometimes opportunities arrive through unexpected pathways. Sometimes God's plans surprise us. Yet even then, gratitude allows us to remain anchored. It reminds us that God's wisdom exceeds our understanding. It reminds us that delays are not necessarily denials. It reminds us that closed doors can be acts of protection just as open doors can be acts of provision. The grateful heart trusts that God knows what He is doing. It rests in the assurance that every season carries purpose. One of the remarkable things about gratitude is that it multiplies awareness of God's presence. The more thankful we become, the more clearly we recognize His fingerprints throughout our lives. We notice blessings that once seemed ordinary. We recognize opportunities that once seemed insignificant. We become aware of moments of grace that previously escaped our attention. A kind word, an unexpected encouragement, a new opportunity, a lesson learned, a prayer answered, a burden lifted, a friendship strengthened, a door quietly opening. These moments are often easy to overlook when we rush through life distracted by worries and demands. But gratitude slows us down enough to notice them. And in noticing them, we discover that God has been at work all along. Even now, there may be doors opening in your life that you have not fully recognized. Perhaps God is opening a door to greater wisdom. Perhaps He is opening a door to healing. Perhaps He is opening a door to growth. Perhaps he is opening a door to a deeper relationship with him. Perhaps he is opening a door to opportunities that will reveal themselves in the coming days. Not every open door arrives with fanfare. Some begin quietly. A conversation, a new idea, a small opportunity, a gentle prompting, a change of perspective. The grateful heart pays attention to these beginnings. It understands that great blessings often start in small ways. Just as mighty trees begin as seeds, many of God's greatest works begin with seemingly ordinary moments. Gratitude allows us to cherish those moments, to nurture them, to recognize their significance. And as we thank God for today's blessings, we position ourselves to receive tomorrow's blessings with greater wisdom and humility. There is also healing in gratitude. Fear loses some of its power when gratitude enters the room. Anxiety becomes quieter when thanksgiving grows louder. Discouragement struggles to survive in a heart that intentionally remembers God's faithfulness. This does not mean gratitude ignores hardship. Rather, gratitude chooses to acknowledge God's goodness even in the presence of hardship. It chooses hope. It chooses trust. It chooses perspective. The grateful person understands that difficulties may be temporary, but God's character remains unchanging. And because his character remains unchanging, there is always reason to give thanks. As you move through this day, make gratitude your companion. Thank God for prayers already answered. Thank him for lessons learned. Thank him for protection you may never fully understand. Thank him for strength that carried you through difficult seasons. Thank him for people who have encouraged your journey. Thank him for opportunities already present in your life. And thank him for the doors he is opening right now, even if you cannot yet see them clearly. Trust that he is preparing pathways. Trust that he is arranging circumstances. Trust that he is working behind scenes, hidden from your view. Trust that his plans continue unfolding according to his perfect wisdom. Lift your voice in thanksgiving before the breakthrough arrives. Offer praise before the answer becomes visible. Celebrate God's faithfulness before the full story is revealed. For gratitude is more than a response to blessing. It is an act of faith. It is a declaration of trust. It is a testimony that God's goodness is worthy of praise in every season. And when the doors finally swing open, when the opportunities arrive, when the prayers are answered, you will look back and discover that gratitude was helping prepare your heart all along. So thank God today. Thank him for yesterday's victories. Thank him for today's mercies. Thank him for tomorrow's promises. Thank him for the doors he has opened. Thank him for the doors he has closed. Thank him for the doors he is opening even now. And walk forward with confidence, knowing that the God who has guided you this far is still leading you onward, still surrounding you with favor, still filling your life with purpose, and still unfolding blessings more beautiful than you can yet imagine.